Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Switch Statement Podcast. It's a podcast for investigations into miscellaneous tech topics.
This is our first episode in our series on The Art of Game Design by Jesse Schell. Hey, Matt.
Hey, John. How is it going?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right.
Are you ready to start a new book?
I am very ready to start a new book. Refactoring, super cool, a lot of useful information, but it was, at the end of the day, a pretty dry user's manual for one area of computer programming, I would say.
Yes, it was very, I think that we are also, we're veterans. We're not like hyper experts or anything, but we've been doing this for a while. And I do think that a lot of the material in that book was super valuable, but it's also like relatively well known if you've been around the block a couple times.
Exactly. Now, moving into scary new territory.
Yes.
The Art of Game Design, a book of lenses. I just absolutely love that name.
It's a little cumbersome, but yeah, I like it. I like this lens concept.
It's cumbersome, but frankly, he pulls it off. In the intro, he gives a really valid justification for why he came up with that name and why it makes sense. So I think he earns it.
I think so too. Even in the preface and the first chapter, I'm already like really liking the way this guy presents his material. He's clearly like read a lot of books, maybe on this topic or maybe a lot of educational books. And he's like approaching this in a slightly different way, it seems, which I appreciate.
He has a very theatrical approach, and it makes sense. He talks about his background, and the guy has done just the most disjoint set of jobs I think I could possibly imagine. He was a juggler. He was a software engineer. He ran a circus or something. And he has a bunch of different jobs. Yeah. And actually, we should say this guy's name, and I'm forgetting off the top. Now I'm pretty sure it's Jesse Ventura.
Jesse Ventura is his name. No, it's Jesse Schell. I actually do not know how to pronounce his last name. It's Schell. I don't know if it's Schell or Skell or Schell.
Yeah, it looks German, so you know German. How would you, if you went maximal German on that pronunciation, how would you go with?
I think it would be Schell.
Schell.
Yeah, because CH is, I think, pronounced like a K in German.
Okay.
Although I'm sure listeners will correct us on that, but I think that would be the pronunciation if it was German.
All right, well, Jesse Schell's book on game design. Yeah, so this episode is about, there's an intro section. It's funny because he just calls the section hello, which you think it's just going to be kind of a standard, pretty short intro, but it's actually the whole philosophy of the book. So it's those Roman numeral pages before the book actually starts, but it's crucial context for reading this book, in my opinion. So
don't skip the forward of this book.
Do not skip the forward.
Yeah.
And in that, he goes into his philosophy for this book, and it was just very different from any other reference text. And it almost feels like less of a reference text and more of a journey.
Journey. Dude, I was just going to say the word journey. That's hilarious that that's what you thought of. Although he mentions the Proust quote, the voyage of discovery. Oh, he doesn't even say journey. The voyage of discovery is not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. So far, the quote game in this book is on point.
He has a really strong quote game.
Yeah. It's a well-designed book. You can tell that, the person who came up with just the framework itself of this book thought a lot about books. He was very meta about it, I think. He took into consideration what books ordinarily do to cover material like this, and he thought it out and kind of flipped it on its head a little bit in a way that I'm finding to be very interesting so far. He's approaching it more like a story. It's much less textbook kind of factual, dry information and a little bit more dramatic. It sounds like it's going to have a lot of personal stories about his own experience and just his own way that he perceives the designing in the industry.
To piggyback on top of that, there's this other aspect. So you talked about this journey. There's this part that he talks about where he's like, there is a map. I have a map of how all of these concepts interrelate. But I'm not going to give you the map right now because it would be overwhelming given that you probably don't know much about game design yet.
Yeah.
And it's something I've thought about before where it's like he makes this claim or he observes this fact that books are necessarily linear. Mm-hmm. But the process of game design is very high dimensional. It's messy. It's this web of interrelated elements that is not completely nonlinear. And this is something I've thought so much about programming, where it's like when you're really in the flow state, like it's not at all linear. Like there's all of these different interconnections that are coming at you at the same time, and you're kind of looking at this problem through a bunch of different lenses, kind of like what he's saying. And I really love that he's acknowledging that fact up front in this book. Like, obviously this book has been laid out linearly, but I don't want this to be interpreted as me saying that you can just follow these series of steps and then you have a game.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because in so many reference texts, it will just be like a topic and then this super complex, obscure information about that topic, which you may only understand once you've gained a lot more understanding about the kind of overall topic. And like you're saying, he's kind of he's holding off. He's approaching this almost like a story where he's doling out these pieces of information as they're useful or as you need them. And it's definitely not like a typical reference text where you might see something early that you're like, what does this even mean? And then you have to refer back to it later, which I appreciate. I like it.
He even goes out and says explicitly that he will withhold information or make things intentionally obscure because the process of figuring out yourself is valuable and it leads to a higher level of understanding of the material. So I don't know. I think, I'm just super excited about how he's going about this. And I think it's going to be a really, really interesting book.
Yeah, me too. It's going to be fun. I did think the first chapter, there was a couple things I thought were funny about it.
What's that?
Like he says right off the bat in the first chapter, like, oh, you want to be a designer? Just say, I am a designer. Just say it out loud. I am a designer.
Did you do it? Did you say it?
I did do it. I literally said, I am a designer. And my wife was in the other room wondering why I was talking to myself. But yeah, it was empowering to just say it. But then he immediately goes on to list all of these skills that you need to be a designer. And he acknowledges that obviously no one can be an expert in all of these skills. There's literally 50 skills or something, maybe 20. But I just thought it was funny how he was like, oh, you want to be a designer? Just, envision that you are one. But then he sort of immediately shattered my dreams by listing all of these skills.
Maybe add a bunch of these skills to your 0 right now. But the point is let's put that front and center that this is something you may need to know something about at some point. And then you'll level up in each one of these things as you get exposed to them. And I think he doesn't want to be like Pollyanna-ish in anyone can be a game designer. It's super easy. But at the same time, he wants to say, yes, you can do this. It's going to be hard, and this is why. But you can make it happen.
Yeah. He mentioned engineering as one of the skills, which is obviously true. If you're making a video game, you're going to need some software engineering. And I like that he acknowledged that video game programming is some of the most complex in the world today. I think if you're an engineer, I think this is something you understand. But I think, at least historically, I think game engineering was sort of thought less of. People thought it was less complicated, I guess because games are thought of as more trivial. And yeah, I just like the acknowledgement that, game programming is truly some of the more complex programming. A lot of the programming that I do professionally is simple compared to game programming, where you're dealing with 3D math and, 3D models and things like that are complicated to interact with. Whereas in web, you're just kind of like, passing JSON across the wire, and it's a little more straightforward in a lot of cases.
I don't know about you, but at our university, we had they were called GSAS, which I guess is Games Simulation and Arts Studies or something to that effect. And it was a completely separate program from the standard computer science program or computer engineering programs. There was definitely like I don't want to go as far as to say it was like a caste system or something, but I did feel like the people in computer science kind of looked down upon the people who were in the GSAS program.
Yeah. No, that's how it was at my university as well. And I do wonder how much this culture has changed, because I went to university a long time ago. But yeah, definitely. There was just this thought that like, oh, video game programming, like that's easier. It's, like you're a lesser engineer if you're doing video game programming, which is just so untrue.
I had a question for you. He has a section called the most important skill. And I don't know, was that what you were going to talk about?
It was, yeah. It's just funny. I mean, I really like this book so far, and I like the way the author's approaching it. But this chapter did sort of feel like something Clippy would have generated. Like it just had this very, I don't want to say trite because that's offensive, but it just had this structure of like, it's all encouraging. And there's like a little bit of material here where I'm talking about like the actual skills, and I'm culminating, in this one single skill that's like the secret to the entire industry. And it just kind of felt like, I don't know, this funny structure. But I did agree with his assessment that listening, spoiler alert, listening is the secret skill that he mentions. And I thought that was really interesting, especially when he sort of elaborated on it. Like he talked about listening to yourself, which I think if you're going to be a designer, I mean, that's such a vital skill. So I agreed. I thought it was cool. I thought the structure was a little bit funny, but also made sense.
He talks about like 5 types of listening. And so he says the types of listening are team, audience, game, listening to the game itself. And I didn't know did he mean like actual listening or being perceptive, like about the game in general?
It's kind of like people who play music and they're not listening to themselves. Like game development is the same thing, where when you're playing your own game, you need to actually be like cognizant of what you're experiencing. Like, are you having fun? I think as an engineer, it's so easy to like run your own programs and just not even think about like your own experience. So I think that's what that was referring to. That's how I read it.
I agree. I definitely think that applies more generally in software engineering, where it's like you're trying to fix a bug or something, and you lose sight of the fact that, oh, actually this whole other experience was degraded or like was really bad, but you're like, well, the bug's gone, so I'm just gonna ship the code.
Exactly. It's that tunnel vision, which I suffer from, really badly, which is one of the reasons I just love, collaborating closely with people. But you got to listen to yourself.
But just to finish the list out, so then obviously you want to listen to the client if you're building a game for someone else.
Right.
And then, as you pointed out, yourself. So, but yeah, I agree. I mean, I think listening is important. Maybe I just need to have a practice of being more intentional about listening.
I think another way that I read this was something that I believe in so strongly, which is like this process of launch and iterate. And I think listening, especially listening to the players, is such an example of launching and iterating. That basically means the same thing to me. So that's one of the reasons I was like, oh, this listening skill really is the most important skill. It almost feels like such a tenuously linked thing, listening to the players and launching and iterating, but sort of see it as the same thing. Also, the listening to self point was something that I just feel is so important if you want to design anything, even if you want to go into product management for, a company like Google or Facebook or something. Like, it's so much about being able to love your own ideas and communicate your ideas in a way that convinces other people that they're good. And if you don't listen to yourself, like if you're kind of lack the confidence to convey your ideas, then you're just not going to be successful at designing things. I mean, you can be successful at helping other people build things, but if you want to build your own stuff, like you need to listen to yourself.
The thing that I've always struggled with in that context is with listening to yourself is just how do I go about achieving confidence in my own ideas? Does the confidence come first? Like, I have an idea and like, I'm confident that this is a really good idea. And then I allow feedback from users to guide whether or not it really is a good idea.
Yeah.
Is that kind of how you think about it?
I think so. I think, this may sound silly, but I think a lot of people have really good ideas. And the issue lies in between, the idea and the implementation of the idea, where I think most people, if they're conceiving of like a game or something, if they could build their conception exactly the way they're conceiving it, like it would be good. I think the thing that I've seen happen to my own self is I'll have what I think is a good idea, but then I'll try to communicate the idea and I'll kind of undermine my own self.
Yeah.
Like I'll just immediately be like, I'm trying to explain the idea to you and I'm immediately hearing myself explain it. And I'm like, oh, maybe it's a terrible idea. And I think that, it's just important to not fall into those traps, because communicating an idea is difficult. You may need to really, really think about the idea in order to communicate it. Don't get down on yourself if you're struggling to convey the idea.
I definitely agree with everything that you're saying. It's like, let's say in the process, you have fleshed out your idea. You know exactly what you're going to say. You've thought of some pitfalls up front. Then you get into the room and then someone comes up with some concern that they have. Sometimes it just feels like it's really hard. It's like this abstract thing that could go wrong with it.
Yeah.
And well, sometimes it's perfectly legitimate and it's obvious to see that's going to be a flaw. But other times it's like this very vague thing like, oh, like what happens if in this scenario, like this thing could happen? And it kind of like misses the larger point. And I think it's not really a good enough point to dismiss the whole idea. But it's like hard at that point to be like, oh, well, now there's a flaw with the idea. Like,
right. And you allow it to kind of undermine the idea in your
right. And then you're just like, all right, well, I'm just going to throw this whole idea away, I guess.
Right. Yeah. So, and I think it's just so important to have that confidence in your ideas, even, in spite of things like what you're talking about, like little issues that come up here and there.
Yeah. I think the real remedy there is just to push back. If you feel like it's not a real material concern, then like you say, you kind of like say that, and then you're just like, all right, well, we will keep an eye out for that. But as it sits today, like we don't think this is going to manifest itself as a serious enough problem to like avoid starting down this path. So
right, yeah.
And the problem is like with some of these problems. And I promise I will stop rambling. But it's like you're not even going to know if they're really problems until you build it. So it's like the cost of figuring out if it is really a problem is like the same as the cost to build it. So it's like,
yes, yeah.
So like, what are you supposed to do? Just not do it because it could be a problem? I don't know.
This is another thing that's so true is I think implementing something is such an important step in learning more about that something. Mm-hmm. And so I think, the skill of being able to prototype something very quickly in order to explore your own ideas is very important to this. At least that's what I've found. It's super hard for me to like fully conceive of like a working game. I need to like jump into Flutter or something and like build a little bit of it.
Yeah.
There's one last thing I wanted to mention about this chapter. Yes. So he mentions the real secret of like good designers. And basically it's like work, loving work and just working hard, which I think is so, so true. But I also just wanted to mention putting stuff out there. This is an issue that I've seen in my own self, like just being able to, if you really want to explore an idea, you need to put it out into the world and like hear the criticism of the idea in order for it to become something real. So working really hard is important, but also launching things.
Yeah, he says the way he frames this is talking to strangers, if I'm understanding correctly. And
Yeah.
I think that's so true, where it's like you need to get different perspectives. Like, and I think this is the solution to tunnel vision is like, yeah, show it to someone else because they're gonna have their own opinion about it, and that is going to make you and the game better. So,
Yeah, exactly. And you definitely have to learn the skill of ignoring other people's opinions sometimes, but a lot of times other people's opinions have at least some kernel of truth, or they'll allow you to adjust your ideas slightly and improve them. So it's just such an important part of any creative process is like showing people and hearing feedback.
All right. So that is our kind of review section for the chapters that we read this week. But I think what will be a great exercise and how we're going to be going about these episodes going forward is to actually design a game.
Yes.
This is part of what he talks about. He says you're not going to be a game designer by reading a book. No book or video is going to teach you to be a game designer. You got to go out and design a game. I think it would be like a hilarious, ironic thing of us to do, to just like passively review this book, like without actually going through the practice of designing the game. So,
yes.
So I think we're going to dedicate some fixed amount of time as the second part of each one of these episodes to going through a game design. Like it's going to be the same design, week to week. We're going to refine it, and as much as possible, we're going to try to keep 100% of the work that we're doing on the game in the podcast. I mean, it's, we're acknowledging the solutions to these problems are not necessarily going to be super refined, but I think it would be valuable to see the whole process end to end.
Yes. Yeah, and we will try to put something out there, right?
Yes.
At the end of this process, we'll have a game that, listeners can actually play.
Yes, 100%.
I'm sure it will be terrible, but it will be a game that we designed, and we will love it.
Dude, have you learned nothing? Have you learned not to listen to yourself? It's going to be amazing.
Okay,
we're going to have an
be
amazing game idea. We're going to have confidence in ourselves, and we're just, I think there's a center ground between being too self-deprecating and like cocky or haughty, where like I think we're going to do it, and we're going to kind of appreciate it for all of its strengths and flaws. That it's definitely going to have flaws, but it should still be fun by the end, I think. So
yeah, no, it'll be awesome. I'm excited. So what kind of game do you want to make?
Yeah, dude, talk about a rabbit hole.
Okay, I'm going to throw some stuff at you.
Okay,
throw some stuff. I want to see what you think. So, do you want to make a 3D real-time experience?
I think we should steer clear of 3D games.
Okay.
This is what I would say.
I agree. That sounds too hard to me. Cards? How do you feel about cards?
I am definitely on board for a card game, and actually, a card game might be the smart thing to do here, because we can, there's some prior art here. John is the author of a wildly popular card rendering library in for Flutter. So
yeah, I love being able to just use pre-existing stuff. That's what it's all about.
Okay, so let's have cards in the running. I think. What do you think about a 2D platformer?
Oh, love it. Yeah, I mean, those are I that's kind of my origin story of gaming, is playing 2D platformers. So that would really be a great experience for me, building one.
One thing I will say, like a flaw with this plan that I see immediately is level design. Like, and I guess you could view that through a couple of different lenses.
Lenses.
Yeah, gosh,
We're gonna feel super self-conscious about saying lenses now.
Oh yeah. You could kind of view that in a couple different ways. Like maybe it's a pro because that will be a new part of the game design process that we can apply. But
Yeah.
it's also a concern, I guess, because in my experience designing levels, even in very simple games, it's a large part of the process of, or like the time spent in making a game. You
Yeah.
can't just necessarily come up with a mechanism and then that's your whole game. I mean, sometimes you do, like 2048, boom, don't need to design any levels.
Yeah.
But or like Flappy Bird, but obviously in a 2D platformer, like you would need, or I mean, maybe not obviously, you could do something procedural, I guess, but
Right. No, and I think it's a super good point. I feel like we should avoid projects that require a lot of, level design, basically, where you have, a lot of projects will have this upfront design, but then this long tail of design where you've created the kernel of a game and now you need to create like each level of the game. I think we should try to design a game where like the kernel is the game, like chess, where it's like chess is literally the board, the way the pieces move, and that's it. And there's a couple other mechanics like check and checkmate and stuff. But it's
okay. What about story?
That also, I mean, I love story, don't get me wrong, but that also feels like a complexifying factor. And I wonder, we should entertain that. We should keep it in the back of our minds. But I would consider cutting that if, the project felt like it was getting big.
In my view, it would be great for us to come up with a game design that could support something like that. Like in a game like chess, for example, you could envision adding a story, and I guess there kind of is a story, right? It's a battle
war
between two kingdoms. Yeah.
Right.
So, I mean, so have you ever played the game Love Letter?
No.
Love Letter is a very interesting game that I think it would be awesome for us to try to copy. So it is a card game. And so you have, I think, 8 different card types, all with beautiful imagery on them.
Okay.
And the premise of the game is you want to send a love letter to the princess. Everyone is trying to send love letters to the princess.
Okay.
And in the deck, you have all of the people of the princess's court. Each card represents its like closeness to the princess with a number, 1 through 8, higher being closer, right? So it's like you have one of her guards, which, as you might expect, like is very far from the princess, and then you have like a count, baron, the princess's handmaiden, and then you also have the princess herself, of course. And the way the game works is you want to be holding the highest level card at the end of the round. All the rounds, they're very quick, and each one of the cards have like an effect essentially. So basically, you have one card, you draw one card, you have to play one of them. So now, like, let me give you an example.
Okay.
The Guardian is 1, right? And then maybe you have the Countess. So Guardian has a value of 1, Countess has a value of 7.
Okay.
If you play, like, obviously in that scenario, like the card that's in your hand represents how close your letter is to the princess. If you play the Countess, like that would be a stupid move because you're swapping a 7 for a 1. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
and
you
like
want
have
to
a
keep
1 in
the
your
higher.
hand, which is dumb.
Yeah, you want to keep the higher one. Sounds like.
Right. So when you play the guard, it gives you the ability to pick another player that you're playing with and attempt to guess the card in their hand. And if you guess it correctly, they're kind of out of the round. So that's just like one example of a mechanism that one of the cards allows. And each card has its own thing. Like one allows you to swap hands with another player.
Yeah. Okay. I see.
So if you'll allow that kind of long-winded explanation, like at the end of the day, you have something that is essentially a card game, but there's still a story there. There's character design, and I think that could be interesting. Where it's still a card game, but we're actually designing a unique set of cards.
Yeah. Okay. If this is what you mean by story, then yes, I think that makes sense. I was thinking along the lines of like, you have this kind of long running narrative that lasts over a couple levels or whatever. I view chess as kind of an analogy to this, where there is this sort of innate story to chess. I mean, it's super vague and kind of like, you can think of it however you want, but there is this overarching narrative of like war, and there's these different units or whatever. So it's kind of similar to this.
Yeah, and so I agree. Like I think this is kind of like Story Light.
Yeah,
where maybe we come up with a premise that has a lightly narrative aspect, but then for the actual game, it's not like we need to come up with dialogue or what have you.
Right. Yeah. What do you think of having like a board? So it sounds like we're honing in on cards, but do we also want to have some kind of central playing space?
If we're really in the spirit of trying to pare down complexity, I think there's going to be a decent bit of complexity dealing with, okay, what are the powers? What are the, I think there's going to be a lot to figure out even with just cards. But I don't know. What can you give me an example of a game with cards that has a board?
I guess I'm not necessarily married to the cards. I'm still just throwing out like mechanics. Like the reason I'm talking about a board is because I think there's a lot of very interesting things you can do with a board. Like an example is this game called Pentago, which I think you're aware of Pentago. But it's basically this game that takes place on like a 6x6 board. You lay these marbles down. The objective is to get 5 marbles in a row. But so every turn you're laying a marble, but you're also like rotating one of the quadrants of the board. So you're completely altering the play space every turn. And it's just this, super duper lightweight mechanics that yields this very complicated and interesting way of playing the game. And I tend to like games like that are, just have very, very basic mechanics, but that can be used in a lot of different ways that, create this super complex playing experience. And yeah, I think card games can do that. Like obviously, euchre or other like bridge has relatively simple mechanics, but has these really, really complex ways of playing the game. And it sounds like Princess might also fit with those lines. But yeah, I don't know. So do you really want to hone in on cards, or like do you think it makes sense to chat about other possible mechanics?
I like what you're saying about boards. I think what I really want is something that has a tiny bit of complexity in a bunch of different directions. That's what I would like. So I almost think something where there are very simple characters, like Clue. Clue is another really good example of a game where like there's a story there.
Yeah.
And I think and there's a board, and like maybe we could come up with something where there's almost like tiles, and those tiles have characters, but then there's like a board with some interesting mechanism, and like there could be like 4 characters, and they all have like different interesting interactions with each other, and then there are ways that they can kind of be moved around the board. What do you think about something like that?
Yeah, I like that. That sounds.
Because I do like games that have like an interesting like character selection aspect to it. Like, you know, oh, like this is, and maybe that's a part of the mechanism where it's like characters have well-known strengths and weaknesses, and then like you like select your character like in secret, and then like part of it is like the metagaming about like, oh, like which character is. Or you could draw a couple of characters and you could pick one, you know. So there's a little bit of randomness there.
Yeah, no, I definitely like that. I'm a big fan of, you know, that secret choice in games. Like I love games where there's someone who's like the bad guy, and that you're sort of motivated or you're incentivized to like keep information from the other people playing.
I actually have to confess I hate games like like Werewolf, and I don't know, I just get very uncomfortable. Like I can't lie very effectively, so if I'm the bad guy, I'm just like worthless to all my other like bad compatriots. So like I just kind of dread those games, and I'm just like, please don't let me be the bad guy.
Okay, we won't build a game like that then. But I just like the idea of you make choices that are unique to you that maybe the other players are unaware of, but they like affect how the game goes for you.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, so let's stop there because I think we actually have a lot of interesting material. We've kind of honed down what kind of game we want, and next time we'll view the game through whatever lens he talks about in that chapter.
Yeah. No, that sounds great.
All right. Well, I'll see you next time.
See you next time, Matt.